Hello and welcome to a new episode in the C&C Command & Conquer Mod Corner. The mod we will be looking at this time has been getting a lot of attention, and I would think rightfully so. Tiberian War WarZone is the first and main part of a large overhaul project for Tiberian Sun. The mod has been built by the user Mercia of Rivier, I hope I'm saying that right, and a whole team of other people. The so-called definitive or final version of the mod has been released in December 2020, but is updated regularly. It does primarily two things: create a new, kind of retro 80s look and feel, and then turns everything on the battlefield up to 11, by including a ton of new units and ramping up the action significantly. Planned future updates aim to add custom campaigns for both sides as well as additional features. Very good, get yourself a nice cup of tea, and let's head into the Warzone. Most Tiberian Sun mods limit themselves to altering the game in smaller instances, adding a couple of units here, removing some there, new soundtrack, more skirmish maps, and so on. More ambitious ones even add a new custom campaign, expanding or altering the original story. However, the more ambitious such a fan project is, the more likely it is to getting stuck somewhere along the way. Total conversion mods often start off as a unique idea, but often lack the polish that simpler projects are able to provide more easily. Therefore, I think it's even more astounding what the developers of Warzone managed to pull off. They looked at the beloved atmospheric RTS that came off the 90s sci-fi mood and said, screw it, what we need is neon, synthesizers and loads of over-the-top 80s action. We like Alien, we like Terminator, make it so. The result is not only a surprisingly playable, but really fun Tiberian Sun mod with great atmosphere and more than just a few opportunities to blow stuff up. You have probably already spotted one of the main features of Warzone, the heavy use of ReShade post-processing filters. In making this video I experimented a bit with the settings, which may result in somewhat inconsistent visuals. In any case, you can modify the settings yourself fairly easily. In my opinion, even milder settings greatly contribute to the overall picture that was intended. More on that later. Each playable side gains a lot of new units and buildings as well, like for example defensive structures. Old structures are all present from what I can tell. We will look at the unit roster in a minute, but besides the massive number of new toys to play around with, the game itself plays a bit faster, even on the same speed level as before. Basic infantry is cheap, firepower throughout is high, and the Tiberium just keeps flowing in. The skirmish mode comes with 50 maps, including many classics and a few new ones, even some more unusual asymmetric designs. Some of the carefully handcrafted maps even feature mutant outposts that are hostile to any intruders. Many standard game options are available, like crates, short game, super weapons and so on. New options include a hardcore mode that cuts all hit points down to 25% and doubles the building time. Also, there's the option to provide so-called cheat units, which is a totally overpowered infantry unit to play around with, plus a massively increased building speed. The option for rich Tiberium eliminates the necessity for Tiberium storage. Besides all the standard settings for the match, there's a number of options for the time of day, like dawn, midday, dusk or night, which all significantly alter the overall lighting. The list of weather options offers more settings still. Besides quote-unquote nice or default weather, new particle and lighting effects let you play during rain, thunderstorm, snow, a blizzard, a sandstorm or an iron storm. Online and LAN play is also available, which I already covered in the video review of Tiberian Resurrection. As I already mentioned, a key factor to the mod is its massively beefed up unit and building roster. Compared to other mods, and especially the main game, Warzone includes a lot of units that more or less do the same job. There are several viable alternatives to the basic units, for example the classic Tic Tank or the Cyborg Infantry. Usually real-time strategy games are designed quite differently. Redundancy is avoided if possible. The entire act of choosing a composition of the own fighting forces has to be straightforward, simple and more or less unambiguous. This is done because time is of the essence and balancing gets exponentially more difficult if the accessible unit roster grows and grows. So one might rightfully ask, why all that clutter? Why all the scrolling in the sidebar? Why over-engineer the game to a degree where the number of usable tech and units becomes a challenge for the player, in the beginning at least? The answer is quite simple. It is oh so much fun trying everything out. even if it means that you quickly lose track when you play the later campaign or jump straight into Skirmish with only a medium tech level enabled. Is it redundant to have around 6 basic infantry units per side, all with fully automatic rifles? Sure. But don't you want to try every unit yourself, read their names, see their animations and build your own little story of the universe during play? This mod refuses the traditional, well-behaved idea of a simplified army and lets you throw everything but the kitchen sink at the enemy. Going through every niche of the tech tree like I've done for the previous mods would be rather exhausting at this point and spoil a good chunk of the experience. I will give a short overview instead. Again, if you prefer to skip this part in order to avoid any or most spoilers, jump to this time index. Both sides start with the basic vehicles and infantry units, plus a couple of new ones. Soon, after the usual tech buildings are constructed, many new units, including numerous ones from Tiberian Wars, like the Zone Trooper, Nord's Flame Tank or the Avatar Mech, can be built. GDI broadens its arsenal of tanks, both standard and hover variants, while Nord gains multiple cyborg units, all similar looking to their previous versions but with greater weapon variety. The roster of aerial units also gets a decent upgrade. There are 2 new bombers for Nord, as well as GDI's air-to-ground attacking Orca Buzzer, sort of an A-10 Warthog. If this was not enough, you can also build a massive gunship reminiscent of the AC-130 Spectre. Following the classic C&C lore, GDI has a more conventional arsenal, even if some sonic weaponry is borrowed from Tiberian Sun sequel. Nord stays true to its exotic and highly advanced technology, cyborgs, lasers and Tiberium warheads included. Building structures also starts out quite normally, with all familiar options present. The standard power plant and a larger version is available for both sides later on. GDI's defensive structures are now single buildings and are quite powerful, especially against infantry. The same is true for Nord's buildings, which include the devastating Shredder turret from Tiberian Wars. There are also some powerful defensive structures near the end of the tech tree, with a particularly impressive one for Nord. To balance things out, GDI can field the Mammoth Mark II, which is an upgraded version from the main game. Also GDI can request dropships for infantry and mechanized units. To call GDI's playstyle more offensive and Nord's more defensive would be a little too generalized, however. Both sides have a plethora of options to their disposal, which invite many different ways to take a shot at it. No pun intended. Of course you can storm the enemy's base just with Titans and the basic infantry if you want, or you can use some of the special and super weapons to make way for an aerial assault, followed by hover tanks and zone troopers. Do I need to say more? GDI and Nord are provided with a number of special weapon abilities, like the drop pod, chemical missile, and of course the ion cannon and Tiberium warhead, which can annihilate a good chunk of your enemies and your base. As usual, switching off the super weapons in the Skirmish menu turns down the stress level quite a bit during a match. Seeker drones are also a viable if unguided option. They are not only capable of destroying one single structure or unit, but cause destruction in a wider area below. GDI's drone triggers an airstrike, whereas Nord's version releases napalm bombs. Or something else. It burns, it's Nord, what do you expect? I have skipped a good part of the available tech trees here, but the rest is better tried out in person, I think. In the end, some of the units and weapons may seem a bit overpowered, like GDI's Juggernaut, but because of the massively dialed up action, fast pace and many different available unit options, it is not a big point of criticism. The game plays notably faster. Tiberium grows faster, the harvesters drive with about twice the speed as before, and the firepower of a well-mixed strike force can decimate the enemy in short time. The mod is definitely deserving of the name WarZone. Besides the Skirmish mode, the entire campaign, including the expansion missions from Firestorm, can be played with a new extended arsenal. You can also download the old FMV cutscenes from the ModDB website as a separate file. The mission variants, where the player only has a handful of units without any base, will play very similarly to the main game, since new unit and structure options are not that prevalent from what I've seen. At this point, the Firestorm missions are still a work in progress, from which I would derive that the mod authors tailor the single-player missions to the new content in terms of balancing. I have just played a few missions from the main campaign and did not find any issue regarding this. However, several players wrote comments on the corresponding ModDB website, expressing that some missions are still bugged, extremely hard or plain unwinnable. This would be annoying for sure, but almost not that surprising when looking at the massive changes that have been made. In any case, all missions can be started from the campaign's menu. To conclude, I think the atmosphere that is generated by the changes of gameplay and especially the graphic overhaul fits the story and Tiberian Sun's world quite nicely, even if it delivers an even more bleak and dystopian picture of the future battlefield. But I can understand if some players would prefer a more muted presentation of the mod, which is easily done by tweaking the ReShade filters and putting on some other music. Anyway, this brings me to the next part. WarZone provides an incredible graphical overhaul of the main game. The engine is still the same, but the aggressive use of particle effects, new, well-fitting sprites, and different ReShade filter presets transform the graphical presentation into something from an 80s James Cameron film. Okay, that's a bit much, but the transformation is impressive and nails the rainy, neon-soaked image of a future that was captured so well in films like Blade Runner or Aliens. This is not to say that the game also hasn't more tuned down sections that look more like the original. There is definitely a great range of variety. Westwood's Tiberian Sun also used particle effects, but they were not featured very strongly, which was likely also to save computational resources. Here pretty much every spark and shell casing is displayed, and that amounts to a lot of particles in the fray of battle. A particularly good looking effect are the green and blue firefly looking specks that fly around in the Tiberium fields. Speaking of which, the Tiberium crystals are now partially larger and feature great hexagon shaped structures in larger fields, a borrowed graphic asset from Tiberian Wars. Especially maps with rich Tiberium flora now look very exotic and underline the alien nature of the mysterious mineral. Fire and explosions are also implemented very well and are an excellent upgrade over the standard sprites in the vanilla game. The relatively simplified death animations of infantry are now visibly more gory. Unit voxel art is for the most part clear, although it can be a bit hard to discern which units are in a densely packed formation when there are many different ones. When playing in a snowy environment, GDI units now have snow camo, a little but very fitting detail. Selecting any unit now shows a frame with more pseudo details next to it. This may look kind of cool, but also produces a bit of visual clutter when selecting an area with multiple units in it. But that may just be my personal preference. There is also an option to scale all infantry units down to a more realistic size. This is an interesting feature, but it results in the fact that they are kind of hard to recognize compared to the mechanized units. Like one would expect, the new sidebar thumbnails are easily recognizable and well done, which becomes essential for that many options to choose from. As you can see, a lot of work went into the presented concept. The visuals are distinctive but highly customizable, and the entire picture is really well complemented by the soundtrack that has been included. I've seen that a lot of the tracks are indeed copyrighted pieces, therefore you might keep that in mind when using them in your own videos or while streaming. The soundtrack has been playing in the background the entire time, but let's have a listen to some individual pieces. By the way, the entire style of colorful explosions, particle effects and the synth-heavy soundtrack remind me a lot of another isometric, retro-futuristic combat game, Brigador, which you definitely should play. The official ModDB website advertises upcoming updates that will be the next big milestones for the mod project. Tiberian War Ion Shock will mainly add a new GDI campaign, maps, as well as the Skrin as a new faction. In Tiberian War Ascension, the new Nord campaign will be included. To summarize, WarZone is an incredibly ambitious overhaul of Tiberian Sun, presenting a new 80s inspired style and fast-paced combat with a focus on experimentation. It might not be the most straightforward mod to get into, but it surely has a lot to offer. I spent a good bit of time alone playing around with the ReShade options. There's more units, more variety, more explosions. If that sounds good to you, I would encourage you to give Tiberian WarZone a try. Future updates also look very promising and might be worth keeping an eye on. That's it from me, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Until then.